Picture the man who, essentially invented the American tough guy on screen. A man who cultivated this intense personal image as a hard-drinking, two-fisted brawler.
Right, the ultimate macho Hollywood director.
Exactly. A director who would literally chew the corners of linen handkerchiefs to absolute shreds out of pure nervous rage while filming.
Yeah, and who routinely, viciously, verbally abused some of the biggest movie stars in the entire world.
But now, imagine that same terrifying man secretly paying the medical bills of the exact people he had just finished screaming at.
Which is such a wild pivot.
It really is. Imagine him weeping openly at sad stories. And imagine him holding the all-time record for winning 4 Academy Awards for Best Director. And not a single one of them was for a Western. They were all for these deeply sensitive, emotional dramas.
It's just a total paradox.
Welcome to today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We're exploring a comprehensive Wikipedia biography of John Ford. And our mission today is to really unpack the complex, completely baffling life of the man who basically built the myth of the American West.
We're going to get into his cinematic achievements, his, frankly, brutal on-set behavior, his actual real-life wartime heroism, and that deep emotional core that he so fiercely, almost violently protected.
So if you have ever felt the pressure to put up a tough front in your own life, or if you've ever wondered how the modern idea of American masculinity was actually constructed, this deep dive is for you.
It's a fascinating look at the man versus the myth.
I'm marveling at this contradiction right off the bat. How can someone be so universally associated with the rugged, dusty Western genre, while his highest official industry accolades were for entirely different types of stories?
It's the ultimate biographical paradox, really, because to even begin understanding the movies he made, you have to look at the intense emotional armor he wore every single day.
Armor is the perfect word for it.
Yeah, because Ford was this wildly forceful personality, but he was completely riddled with these deep eccentricities. Like, starting in the 1930s, he almost always wore dark glasses or a patch over his left eye.
Right, supposedly because it was sensitive to light.
Supposedly, yeah. And he was an inveterate pipe smoker. But the craziest part is the handkerchiefs. His wife, Mary, would give him a dozen fresh linen handkerchiefs every morning.
A dozen?
A dozen. And by the end of a day's filming, he would have chewed the corners of every single one of them into just this pulpy mess.
Oh, wow. That just paints a picture of a guy who is vibrating with internal tension. It's like he had all this erratic energy, and he just didn't know what to do with it, right?
Exactly. And he had these incredibly strict rules, too. Like, he strongly discouraged chatter on set, and he absolutely hated swearing.
Wait, really? The tough guy hated swearing?
Oh, yeah. Especially in front of women. If someone cursed, he would literally throw them off the production right then and there.
That's fascinating.
Right, because he was fiercely intelligent and incredibly well-read, but he hid it so well. You have to remember, the cutthroat atmosphere of early Hollywood was not a place that rewarded sensitivity.
So to protect himself, he just deliberately cultivates this terrifying persona.
Precisely, which sets up one of the most revealing stories in the entire biography. It comes from an actor named Frank Baker, who actually witnessed this play out during the Great Depression.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So Ford is standing outside his office. He's a very wealthy, powerful man by this point.
Mm-hmm.
And a destitute former actor walks up to him and quietly asks for a loan of $200 to pay for his wife's surgery.
Which, during the Depression, $200 is a massive sum of money.
Huge. It's a fortune. And Ford's public reaction to this request is just explosive. He literally physically launches himself at the older man, knocks him to the floor, and stands over him screaming.
Are you kidding me?
No, he's screaming, "How dare you come here like this? Who do you think you are to talk to me this way?" He just unleashes this terrifying rage before storming away, leaving the guy completely humiliated on the ground.
See, I remember reading that in the sources, just thinking, okay, this guy is just a monster.
Right, but the twist here is what completely reframes him, because immediately after that horrifying public display, Ford's business manager quietly meets the shaken old man at the door.
Oh, man.
And he hands him a check, not for $200, but for $1,000.
Wow.
And then a chauffeur drives the man home, where a private ambulance is already waiting to take his wife to the hospital, and Ford didn't even stop there.
What else did he do?
He flew in a specialist all the way from San Francisco at his own personal expense to perform the surgery. And then later on, he bought the couple a house and gave them a pension for life.
That's unbelievable.
It really is. And when Frank Baker, the guy who saw the attack, recounted that incredible sequence of events to Ford's older brother, Francis, the older brother wasn't surprised at all.
Really? What does he say?
Francis said, and I quote, "Any moment, if that old actor had kept talking, people would have realized what a softy Jack is. He couldn't have stood through that sad story without breaking down. He's built this whole legend of toughness around himself to protect his softness."
Wow. It makes me think of, like, a massive, heavy steel door on a bank vault. The only reason you build a door that thick and that intimidating is because whatever's hiding behind it is incredibly valuable and totally fragile.
That's a great analogy.
But I guess my question is, what kind of environment forces a person to build a blast shield like that in the first place? Like, what was he actually protecting himself from early on?
Well, he was protecting himself from an industry that was built from scratch by ruthless, wildly ambitious people. I mean, early Hollywood was the Wild West in a very literal sense.
Right. There were no rules yet.
Exactly. It was full of immigrants and first-generation Americans fighting tooth and nail for a piece of the pie. Weakness was instantly exploited, and Ford's protective shell was really forged in that fire.
Because he comes from pretty humble beginnings,
Oh,
right?
very much so. He was born John Martin Feeney in 1894 in Portland, Maine, to Irish immigrant parents. He grew up in this rough-and-tumble Irish neighborhood called Munjoy Hill.
And he played football in high school. And his nickname was Bull, right? Because of his playing style.
Yeah, Bull Feeney. He would just lower his helmet and blindly charge the defensive line.
Which, honestly, that charge the line mentality seems to be the defining strategy of his entire life.
Completely. And so he ends up following his much older brother, Francis, out to California. Now, at the time, Francis was already this prominent Hollywood actor, writer, and director. He even had his own production company.
Because the younger brother, who was calling himself Jack at the time, he starts as an assistant, right? Like a stuntman and a handyman.
Yeah, and he often literally doubled for Francis in stunts because they looked so remarkably similar.
I feel like that sibling dynamic is so crucial to understanding him.
It's the key to his early jive, because within a few short years, the younger brother completely eclipses the older one. Francis's career declines, while Jack, now adopting the name John Ford, becomes one of the most prolific, powerful directors in town.
That has to cause some tension.
Massive tension. He remained highly sensitive about surpassing his brother for the rest of his life. But he channeled all that ambition into his first major breakout success, which was the 1924 silent epic, The Iron Horse.
Okay, we really need to pause and explain the sheer logistical madness of this production. Because it was a massive account of the building of the first transcontinental railroad. And this is long before computer-generated effects.
Oh, absolutely. If you wanted a town on screen, you had to literally build it.
Exactly. They filmed on location in the freezing Sierra Nevada mountains. They built 2 entire towns from scratch. They managed 5,000 extras, 100 cooks, a full cavalry regiment, 1,300 bison, and 10,000 cattle.
It's just staggering to even think about organizing that.
And they even tracked down and used the original stagecoach once owned by Horace Greeley, along with replicas of the actual historical locomotives.
But the elements were working against them. The weather was brutal, and production fell horribly behind schedule.
The studio must have been freaking out.
Oh, the executives back at Fox Studios were panicking. They started firing off these angry telegrams to the freezing mountains, demanding results and threatening to pull the plug on the whole thing.
And Ford's response to these studio executives threatening him is legendary. He didn't write back right.
No. He would hold the telegrams up in the air and have a stunt gunman named Edward Partner Jones literally shoot bullet holes through the studio boss's name on the paper, and then he'd just send the paper back.
That is amazing. When you hear things like that, it really pushes back on the traditional idea of what a film director even is.
Yeah.
He sounds less like an artist standing at a canvas and much more like a literal military general trying to conquer the elements and his own superiors.
That field general mentality is exactly what allowed him to command the next phase of his career. He took that battlefield approach and used it to revive a completely dead movie genre.
The Western.
The Western. And in the process, he forged the biggest movie star of the 20th century. But, as the sources document extensively, his methods came at a severe psychological cost for his actors.
So how exactly did he go about reviving it? Because by the late 1930s, the big studios wouldn't even touch Westerns.
They viewed them as cheap, low-budget pulp, like kids stuff, basically. The studios genuinely believed audiences had outgrown them, but Ford had this project called Stagecoach.
And he stubbornly shopped it around Hollywood for almost a year, right?
Wow.
Fighting entrenched industry prejudice.
Yeah, he knew the genre wasn't dead, it just needed to be treated with psychological realism instead of cartoonish action.
And his other major battle was the casting. He wanted to cast his friend, a guy who was virtually unknown at the time, named John Wayne.
Right.
But the studios wanted a massive, polished star like Gary Cooper. Why was Ford so obsessed with putting an unknown in the lead role?
Because a polished theatrical star like Gary Cooper brings too much glamour, I guess you'd say. Ford recognized that John Wayne possessed this perfect everyman quality. He looked like a guy who actually lived in the dirt and the dust.
So he felt Wayne was more authentic.
Exactly. Ford predicted Wayne would become the biggest star in the world because audiences would see themselves in him. He grounded the myth.
And his instincts were dead on. Stagecoach releases in 1939 and becomes a massive critical and commercial smash, single-handedly revitalizing the Western.
And it also establishes the famous John Ford Stock Company.
Which was basically his own private army of actors and crew, right?
Yeah, people like John Wayne, Henry Fonda, Maureen O'Hara, Ward Bond, these people returned to work for him for decades. They formed this incredibly tight-knit unit.
But being in that unit meant enduring Ford's relentless bullying.
It really did. He used psychological warfare to strip away their vanity. I mean, he famously punched Henry Fonda in the jaw during a meeting for the movie Mr. Roberts, literally knocking him across the room and creating a permanent rift between them.
That is just wild.
He constantly taunted John Wayne on set, calling him a big idiot. He once made the actor Evan O'Brien do 42 takes of a single scene on The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
42 takes. For what?
Just because O'Brien rested his hand on a railing instead of drooping his hand over it like Ford had subtly demonstrated.
It feels like this extreme dominance play to show them who is in absolute control. And sometimes it wasn't even about the movie itself, it was historical.
Right, the Lord Walscourt story.
Yes. During the filming of Mogambo in Africa, Ford sadistically tormented a man named Lord Walscourt for weeks.
And the man was just part of a unit hired to protect the crew, right?
Exactly. But Ford bawled him out continually in front of the entire production, and the crew only later discovered the reason. Before emigrating to America, Ford's own grandfather had been a day laborer on the estate in Ireland owned by the original Lord Walscourt.
So Ford was basically using a Hollywood movie set to exact multi-generational class revenge on the man's descendant.
Which brings up a fascinating psychological question about artistic collaboration. With all of this abuse, the public humiliation, the sadism, why did these massive, ego-driven movie stars keep coming back? I mean, they were rich and famous. They didn't need the money.
Right.
So why not just walk off the set?
It's a great question. And the actor Harry Carey Jr., who went by Dobe and was a staple in Ford's films, he offered the best explanation for this. He said that despite the terror, Ford had an aura that made everyone want to almost kill themselves to please him.
That's a powerful kind of charisma.
It is. Carey noted that upon arriving on a Ford set, you felt immediately that something special was going to happen. He said, and I quote, "You would feel spiritually awakened all of a sudden."
Wow. Spiritually awake?
Yeah. Ford broke them down so completely that they stopped acting and started simply being. He demanded raw honesty, and he got it.
He squeezed their absolute best work out of them. But here is the grand irony of his career. While he was busy building this myth of the rugged American cowboy in the dirt with John Wayne, his highest official artistic achievements and his actual real-life heroism had absolutely nothing to do with the Wild West.
No, not at all. John Ford holds the all-time record for Best Director Oscars. He won 4 of them.
4?
For The Informer, The Grapes of Wrath, How Green Was My Valley, and The Quiet Man. Not a single one of those is a Western.
And to add to the legend, he famously shunned the Academy Awards ceremonies. He rarely even bothered to show up and collect his trophies.
Well, to be fair, he was a little too busy living out the reality of the tough guy myth he projected on screen.
Right. Because when World War II broke out, Ford didn't stay in Hollywood. He was commissioned in the United States Navy Reserve and served as head of the photographic unit for the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS.
And this wasn't some cushy desk job for a celebrity, you know. Ford and his men were going on highly classified, incredibly dangerous missions.
He was literally at the Battle of Midway. Think about the reality of that. A millionaire movie director is standing on Sand Island, filming the Japanese attack while under heavy fire from enemy aircraft.
He was actually wounded in the left arm by a machine gun bullet while keeping the camera rolling. I mean, he was filming real death after a career of staging fake gunfights.
And he was also present at Omaha Beach on D-Day. He watched the first wave of soldiers land, and then he landed on the beach himself with a team of Coast Guard cameramen.
He directed operations from behind beach obstacles while the entire area was being heavily shelled.
And what really strikes me is the grim work he had to do later. He had to sign sworn, legal affidavits testifying that the film he captured at the Nazi concentration camps was authentic.
Right, because the footage was so horrific that people thought it must have been staged or faked.
Exactly. His wartime service fundamentally changed him. He was repeatedly cited for bravery and eventually rose to the rank of Rear Admiral.
Try to picture a modern equivalent to this. Imagine if a top-tier director today, someone like Steven Spielberg or Christopher Nolan, just paused their career at their absolute creative peak to secretly take a camera to the front lines of a global conflict.
Storm a beach and take a bullet.
Exactly. It proves unequivocally that Ford's tough guy persona was not just an act. The blast shield was real, and so is the steel underneath it.
And returning from the war as a decorated hero really cemented his status as an American patriot. But that makes his complex political legacy in the post-war years incredibly difficult to categorize.
It does. Let's look at that post-war era. Visually, he becomes completely tied to Monument Valley on the Utah-Arizona border.
Right. He shoots his 1956 masterpiece, The Searchers, out there.
And the landscape becomes so synonymous with his name that Orson Welles actually claimed other directors were terrified to shoot in Monument Valley because they'd be accused of plagiarizing John Ford.
But as his visual style locked in, his political actions became this maze of contradictions.
Completely. To understand this, we really have to impartially look at the facts of the McCarthy era in Hollywood.
Right. This was a time of sheer paranoia, where careers were ruined overnight by whispers of communist sympathies.
The blacklist was a very real mechanism of control, and within the Directors Guild of America, there was this highly charged faction led by the legendary director Cecil B. DeMille.
And DeMille tried to force mandatory loyalty oaths on all guild members, right, to root out supposed communists.
Yes, and he also conducted a whispering campaign to oust the guild president at the time, Joseph Mankiewicz, who opposed the oaths.
The sources describe this massive, unbelievably tense 4-hour meeting of the Directors Guild. DeMille's faction speaks. The room is totally polarized. And then Ford stands up.
And his opening line is just one of the greatest in Hollywood history. He says, "My name is John Ford. I make Westerns."
It's such a perfect understatement.
It is. And then he looks directly at DeMille and says, "I don't like you, CB. I don't like what you stand for, and I don't like what you've been saying here tonight."
Wow. But the true brilliance of Ford's intervention was how he managed the mechanics of the room, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He didn't just insult DeMille. Ford proposed a vote of confidence in Mankiewicz, defending his colleague against the blacklist. But he knew if DeMille was completely humiliated, the guild might fracture entirely.
So what did he do?
Ford engineered a move where the entire board resigned, allowing a complete reset. He effectively killed the McCarthyite coup while strategically keeping the Union intact.
So he shuts down a witch hunt and saves his union. So you've got this guy fighting blacklists and standing up as a pro-union man who hated studio bosses.
Right.
But hold on, how do you reconcile that with his later life? Because he publicly declared himself a Maine Republican. He supported Richard Nixon, he voted for Barry Goldwater, and he heavily supported the Vietnam War.
Yep, all true.
And yet, at the exact same time, he was secretly funneling money to the underground Irish Republican Army.
Yeah.
How does a Nixon Republican fund an armed rebel group overseas? Did he just not see the contradiction?
Well, according to the film scholar Tag Gallagher, Ford was perhaps essentially apolitical in the traditional sense. He didn't operate on party platforms.
So what did he operate on?
He operated on a highly individualized moral code based on personal loyalty, defiance of authority, and his Irish heritage. If he felt a cause aligned with his personal sense of justice or his roots, he supported it, completely ignoring how it fit into a modern political binary.
He absolutely refused to be put in a box.
Never.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, it's clear John Ford didn't just capture the American myth on film, he embodied it. He was flawed, contradictory, fiercely independent, violently protective, and surprisingly sentimental.
And his actual filmmaking process was the ultimate expression of that independence, because Ford was famous for editing in the camera.
Wait, I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of that. If a director cuts in the camera, does that mean they only shoot the exact angle they want, leaving the studio with literally zero extra B-roll or alternative takes to play with?
That is the entire point. He would shoot exactly what he needed for his vision and absolutely nothing more.
That's incredibly risky.
It is, but as Ford himself noted, if you give a studio a lot of film, the committee takes over. Executives start juggling scenes around and changing the narrative.
Oh, I see. By cutting in the camera, he ensured that studio executives couldn't tamper with the movie in post-production. They physically didn't have the film to do it.
Exactly. It was the ultimate mechanism of control over his art.
That is brilliant. So, the next time you sit down to watch a classic movie and you see a strong, silent, complex hero gazing out over a rugged landscape, remember that you're essentially looking at John Ford's emotional armor projected right onto the screen.
The man and the myth, forever intertwined in the dust of Monument Valley.
I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. We mentioned earlier that Ford famously hated long exposition scenes. If a script had too much dialogue, he would literally tear those pages out right there on the set.
Just rip them out.
Right. He preferred to let the physical landscape, the subtle actions, and the actors' faces tell the story instead of relying on words. In our modern age, where we constantly over-explain ourselves in long texts, on social media, and our relationships, what power might we find in adopting a piece of Ford's philosophy? What could we learn from staying quiet and letting our actions and the scenery speak for themselves?